Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Collector Car Stories podcast here on collectorcarcanada.ca. Today we have one of my new car friends. His name is Shawn. Shawn, thank you for joining us today. What we're going to do is we're going to hear a couple of stories from Shawn, and then as you might have gathered, we're sitting in front of one of Shawn's garages, I'll say. There are 5 great cars in here that we're going to get a tour of. We're going to break it down into 2 episodes. So today you're going to see 3 of the cars, and then on a future episode you'll see the other 2. So I won't let the cat out of the bag as to what Shawn's got behind us here. I do want to remind everyone that in addition to the Car Reviews podcast, where we review every car that is available on the website, collectorcarcanada.ca, we're always looking for other people who might want to tell their story on one of these CCS Collector Car Stories podcasts. So if you're such a person and you've got a great car or collection of cars to tell us about, we got blessed with a windy day today, or a car story or a road trip, something like that, hit us up. You'll see a contact us page on every page of the website, collectorcarcanada.ca, or our email address is admin@collectorcarcanada.ca. So Shawn, after all that blurb, thank you again for joining us today.
My pleasure, David.
Do you have anything to tell us about Shawn?
Oh, where to start?
Yeah, I'm going to prompt you, but it was intended to be a rhetorical question. But while we're seated at the table, before we start looking at the cars, maybe tell us how you got started in the car hobby, if you waited till you had your driver's license, or maybe it started sooner. Open forum, let's hear from you.
Well, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, as intended.
So, I think my first memory was a memory that sparked my interest in cars.
Yeah.
And when I was just very, very small child, my parents had an early 50s Monarch that had been gifted to them by my grandmother.
Right.
And they...
So was it the family car, effectively?
It was a family car for a very short period of time because we lived on a dirt road, and it was probably about 13 or 14 years old at the time, and it lasted about a year with my dad driving it on a dirt road.
Right.
So moving forward a little bit, this car was parked out in the back 40. I grew up on a farm, and one day when I was very, very young, I was taken for a walk, and I came upon this car, and immediately my eyes lit up, and I was let in the car, and I saw this white button on the dash.
Okay. So this is the Monarch after it kind of been decommissioned.
After it was dead.
It's out in the back 40.
And this white button grabbed my attention.
On the inside or the outside?
On the inside, on the dash. Old school ivory little white button.
Yeah.
And that did it for me. From that point on, cars were an obsession.
Was there a significance to that button, or it just caught your eye? What did it control?
The significance was it was just different color than the rest of the buttons. I have no idea. When I say I was young, I was probably 2 or 3 years old.
But you can remember seeing it?
But I remember that moment, and that was a pivotal moment for me.
That got you started.
Got me started.
Was this a decorative button, or would it have controlled something?
It would have controlled something. Yeah. It was like a button you'd pull to turn the wipers on or something like that.
So probably, I mean, the car would have been 15 or 20 years old at this point. Probably not much to look at this point, but...
It was just a piece of junk at that point.
Were the windows rolled up? Were you able to get in and touch the button?
I was in the car, and yes, touching that button.
Okay.
And it's the button I remember more than anything else, the button.
That is kind of fun. That is kind of fun. A guy like you, I'm half surprised you haven't procured a 51 Monarch so that you could have the car with that button and satisfy yourself with it. Yeah. Okay, so that was a 51. I know I don't want to get started on too much of the detail of the cars before we start walking around, but spoiler alert, there's a car from 1965 in your garage. I can see it right now. You can't, and the camera can't. But I think you told me earlier that 60s, 70s, 80s cars, would they be sort of prime time for the cars you like, even today?
Yes, for sure. I think we always go back to what we remember growing up and what excited us. I think that's when the passion's the strongest, and then we revert back. So certainly those are the era of cars that I think most excite me.
Yeah.
And people look down at the 80s, but I think there was some noteworthy cars in that time period as well. And a lot of these cars just didn't survive.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what's fun about them. Because here in Ontario, anyway, we've got an international audience, I suppose. But here in Ontario, cars like the ones we're seated in front of, the only way these have survived is if they didn't roll in the winter. Although we're in Niagara region, it's pretty temperate winters here nowadays. But that's something I get a real kick out of when I get the privilege of traveling to the West Coast, be it in Canada or the US. The roads are not treated with salt there. They don't have the climate we do. And an everyday car from the late 80s, early 90s, I'm thinking more of Toyotas, I suppose, and Hondas, because they got eaten up by salt here in Ontario. But you might see a late 80s Honda Civic still doing its daily duty, and that really strikes me because we don't have that here in Ontario.
Yeah, for sure.
They didn't survive here. So, I don't know, why don't you give me a few examples of 60s, 70s, 80s cars that you remember, and if you had limitless space and limitless budget, might be the apples of your eye.
Well, I think I've been a Mustang guy foremost
Yeah.
through the years. When I was young, my grandfather had a 67 Mustang, and we
Okay.
spent a lot of time in that car.
What was the body style?
Coupe?
Coupe.
Yep, it was a red coupe, candy apple red coupe,
Yeah.
black interior, 302.
Yeah.
It excited me at that time.
Sure.
And of course, that was the pinnacle of the Mustang popularity. So that really started it for me. And then my cousins ended up with a 69 convertible Mustang. So I always had those cars in my mind. And later,
The 4 round lights across the front on 69s?
70 had the 4, 69 had the 2, I believe. If I got it right. I remember
We'll
that.
check that later.
Yes. And so it was, loved that car. Loved as a teenager driving that car when I
Yeah.
got the chance. It
Yeah.
was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But I also loved just the average car. You talk about one of my cars is a 65 Cadillac that has my grandmother bought brand new, and I have today. And the big Cadillacs, big Lincolns, I've always had a soft spot for. Really love the Thunderbirds as well. I have a newer Thunderbird, but I love the 60s, 70s Thunderbirds. I just always enjoyed the appointments of the cars and the luxury aspect of it. Trucks, SUVs, the old Broncos, really
yeah.
love them.
Yeah, yeah.
Had old Broncos before. Pickup trucks are hitting their stride. I grew up driving pickups on the farm and never really thought of them as a collectible until later on. But
Because so many people were just like that.
Yeah,
That's why they're
absolutely.
becoming collectible today.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so long as you mentioned T-Birds. One car that Shawn has here on the site, but not in this garage, is an 02 T-Bird.
Yes.
Which I think was the first year of the return of the
That's
last,
correct. The retro T-Birds.
most recent generation. But so long as you tell your white button story about the 51 Monarch. Today's about you, Shawn, but I have to tell you this one. And I do not remember this. It's too young. I was too young to remember, but I was assured by my late great parents that it in fact happened. When I was born, my father had a 68 Thunderbird with the single lens taillight going all the way across. And apparently before, I was born in January, so this was before my summer where I would have been about a year and a half old. Apparently I climbed into it, managed to find a way to move the column shifter. Maybe the keys were in it, maybe they weren't, I don't know. My parents aren't around for me to tell me anymore. And they probably wouldn't have admitted to having left the keys in it if I was
I think they
wandering around.
shifted without the key back then.
Well, I'm glad to hear that for my parents' sake. But apparently I got that thing into neutral, and we lived in a house with a driveway, went downhill to the street, and I reversed out of the driveway as a 1.5-year-old without having the car running. So, but I've yet to own a T-Bird. But as I say, I don't remember that happening, but I do remember the story.
I did have a 69 T-Bird, which was the same body style.
Yeah. I'm familiar with the 69 as well, yeah. So I think what I'll do now is we'll cut off this shot. I'll hand hold the camera, and we'll do a little tour of the 5 cars that you have in this building. As I say, up front, Shawn's got 2 Chrysler products. They're both Jeep Grand Cherokees, modern Jeep, daily driver type Grand Cherokees.
I am a Jeep guy too. I
Yeah.
love the old Jeeps.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm thinking of Jeep as being Chrysler, but
Yeah.
it's only been a Chrysler product since 1988, I think it was, somewhere
Yes,
around there.
that's right.
Somewhere around there, and there was also his 02 T-Bird up front, which was I think the Jeeps are a little too modern for us to hit on this on this podcast, but as I say, I'll go grab the camera and handhold it, and we'll take a look at the 5 cars that we have in the building here. Thank you, Shawn.
Great. My pleasure, David.
All right. Okay, we've made our way inside the building here. We're going to start with a 1990 Mustang LX. There's some special things about this particular Mustang, and I'm going to wait for Shawn to tell us about them. But is it fair to say, Shawn, a Mustang LX 5-liter from 1990?
Yes, I put a little bit of precursor to say it's a little bit of a hybrid car between a GT and an
It
LX,
is, yeah.
and a little bit of story behind that.
Yeah, I was going to say how of the cars we have in your building here, this is probably the one with which I'm most familiar. Actually, there are 2 in here that I've had, but this is the one I had for longer. I had a 1990 Mustang GT convertible. So it looked a little different being that it was a GT, but same power plant. And let the viewers in on something many would know. But when we started the business, it was not easy getting listings week to week because all I had really proven was that I could get a website launched. And I listed my beloved 1990 Mustang GT convertible thinking it would not sell. And Albert, I know you're watching. Sure enough, it sold. I've since bought another Mustang, but I really do miss that 90. So, Shawn, as I was sort of hinting at, this is a special version of a 90 Mustang with the 5-liter. Why don't you tell us a bit about it?
Sure, David. First of all, this is the first car I bought as a collector, so to speak. The first toy, the first car when I got to a point in my life that I could afford to buy a car just to have fun with. This was the first one. So I've owned it for about 25 years.
Oh, 25 years, wow.
Yeah, so I've had it for quite a while. It is an original car.
So the car is 34 years old, so you've had it for most of it.
9 years old.
Yeah.
So it was originally a dealer demo on St. Catharines.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I had the luxury of driving the car when it was a demo. And when I was looking for a car, I said, I'm going to buy a 5-speed GT. Preferably the 87, 89 era.
I think I know why. Partly because of steering wheel.
I like the steering wheel. I like the big headrests on the seats.
Right.
They were all, until 93, they were basically the same car from 87 until 93, but just like that, the big headrest look of the 87s to 89s.
So I'll just let the viewers in. Some of them haven't been around with Mustangs as much as you. In 1990, Ford pretty well across the whole line went to an airbag steering wheel. And I think it used the same steering wheel in almost every car, including the Mustang. It's a little bit more slimline on the 87 you're going to show us next. So that's what I think of as the big difference for 90.
And they did not include a tilt steering wheel.
With the airbags, right.
Which was a bigger feature there.
Sure.
Having said that, when this car came up, someone called me and said, I know the exact car for you. It's perfect, exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And so I went and looked at the car, and I wanted a manual. It's an automatic. I didn't really want a convertible. It's a convertible.
Right.
It's not an 89. It's a 90.
Yeah.
But I know this car.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at it, and at the time.
So I was going to mention this too. Sorry to cut you off. For the people at home, there are 2 cars of the 5 in this building that are owned by the original family owners. And this is one of them, but it hasn't been continuous ownership.
Well, no, this one I wasn't owned by the family.
Okay.
I purchased at 9 years old. It was, I'd say family. I worked at the dealership that the car was bought new at.
Originally delivered,
so,
yeah.
Yes, so that's where I knew the car new.
Yeah.
And then when I came across the car, I didn't first key in that it was that car, but
right. Well, how would you? Yeah.
Had 49,000 kilometers on it, but it was the right car, so I ended up buying the car, and I never regretted it, and I've enjoyed quite a bit of time with the car. Although the mileage is still sitting at about 69,000 kilometers.
Oh, it's low.
Relatively low. Original paint. The tires aren't original and the wheels, but I do have the original tires and wheels for the car.
Would this have had gator backs? VR 50s or 60s?
Not gator backs, they were Eagles. Goodyear Eagles.
Eagles, yeah.
Yeah.
With the gator back, when I say gator back, I think that's the tread pattern. But
could
Eagle VR 60 or VR 50.
they were VR
Corvette had one and Mustang had the other. I can't remember which is which.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say you still have them?
I still have them.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't drive on them anymore.
No. But it's fun for Provenance sake to still have them.
And it was interesting because when the car was new, we knew it as a 25th anniversary limited edition feature car.
Right.
And Ford came out with feature cars from 90, 91, 92, 93 for the Mustangs, and this was considered the first feature car.
Okay.
And since Ford didn't do a 25th anniversary car, it was the car that they brought out for that.
Right.
Later on, we discovered that the car actually got known as a 7-Up car.
Right.
And because it became known to the public that in 1990, this car was commissioned by 7-Up to Ford to build 70 of them to give away in the NCAA championships that year.
So is that the basketball tournament?
Basketball championships.
Yeah.
The high school or
College.
college basketball. And they, the promotion fell through. 7-Up gave 70 of those cars away in an internal promotion in 7-Up to their employees. So Ford decided the car looked great, it was unique, that they would sell them and make a limited production. So there was 4,306 made, and 273 came to Canada.
Okay.
And what was unique about the car was, first of all, it was an LX body, but they put the GT wheels on it, and
Right.
GT appointments. The interior was
So
solid
these
white.
wheels have been changed.
These wheels have been changed, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And
Sorry, I
these are
interrupted you. So it's
No
GT
problem.
wheels.
GT wheels, and then the interior was solid white. So none of the
All
other
of them white
Mustangs came
interiors.
with all white. They had gray inserts, gray dash, or body color dash, blue and red, depending on the interior. But
For-
this one came solid white.
For LX. Oh, I see. I
For
see.
LX and GT, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Off camera, I'll tell you about my 90. Go ahead.
So that was a key appointment. Plus, any of the cars that were built, 25 years from the day the first Mustang was built till a year later, got 25 years on the dash.
Right.
Mustang.
And there's a bit of controversy about 25th anniversary with the 89s and 90s, correct?
Absolutely, because the car was an afterthought. They were originally going to have a 351 version 89
Yeah.
hatchback, which was going to be the 25th anniversary car. It got scrapped.
Was that going to be a GT or
No, it was
even
an
more
LX
special?
Body. It was an LX body as well. That was planned.
Okay. Yeah.
But it had the 351 or the 5.8 liter engine, which was going to be the big difference.
Right.
And when that fell through, they just decided to put this badge on the dash. And then later on, when the 7-Up promotion fell through, they decided to badge this car as a 25th anniversary feature car. So it was a limited edition feature car, is what they called it.
So part of what I love about my job is I get to know more and more particulars about cars I really like. So as I mentioned, I had the 90 GT convertible and I had the 25 years badge on the dash like this one does. Before I talked to you today, Shawn, I could have lost some bets about the 25-year business. So now I know better than to open my mouth. But it is amazing about just cars generally. The more you know, the more you realize you have to learn because there are so many particularities.
Well, and that's a good point. When you're looking for a collector car, do your research.
Yeah.
So many people advertise a Mustang as a 25th anniversary edition because of the badge on it.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't understand that doesn't mean anything.
There are also people, you're going to know this part better than I do. But the next car we're going to get to is your 87 Mustang GT. And I know that to be a U.S. market car. And I see a Cobra decal on the back. But I understood it was the Canadian Mustang GTs that got the Cobra
100%.
decal. So,
100%.
okay, yeah. So
And I did that to be a
Maybe
little bit of
we'll
an
get-
instigator.
yeah, well, we'll get to it when we get to the car, but yeah. But when I sold my 90 Mustang GT, which had that Cobra decal on the rear, the buyer, Albert, I know you're watching. The buyer believed that it was a special Cobra version of the 90 Mustang GT, whereas in fact all the Canadian market cars are Cobras.
Yes, every GT, I believe until 90, 87 to 90.
Through 90, yeah.
Had the Cobra badging and
Yeah.
designation, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but in the US, they did not have that.
Right. And if you want to have some fun, you can go on some Mustang forums where they're primarily American participants, and you can read people bickering about those Cobra badges. And, well, let's just say they should talk to Shawn.
And usually in those forums, someone will pipe up. I think in Canada they call them Cobra.
Yeah.
Someone gets that tidbit from someone. And then the banter goes back and forth.
So you've been on those forums
Yes,
too,
yeah,
yes, yeah.
absolutely.
That's funny. So, okay, I think that's a pretty good look at the, I'll call it the 7-Up car. That's what I think of it as. So certainly green and white are the corporate colors for 7-Up.
Yeah.
Green paint and a white top. I think you said you replaced the top, eh?
The top I did years.
Yeah.
It wasn't terrible. I'm a little obsessive about it. Had a little bit of cracking starting, and
Right.
said it was time. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. The other point I'd make about this car was this emerald green was unique to this car in 1990.
Okay.
Now we saw this color resurface after 1990 on several Ford cars because it was a nice color at the time. But if you wanted,
It is a very 90s color, isn't it? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And if you wanted an emerald green 1990, this was the only one you got.
yeah. Okay. We want to thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Anything you want to close with that we have left out?
No, it's a pleasure, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had the chance for you to come down. And
Me too.
love to talk about cars. Could talk all day, as we know we've been at it a few hours.
Yeah,
now.
we have.
But
You know what we haven't hit? You can't see it, I can. Your t-shirt.
Yes. Well, it's funny because my wife said, "Where did you get that T-shirt from?"
Yeah.
I said 25 years ago when I signed up for the 7-Up.
You had the t-shirt before you had
They sent me the T-shirt.
You had the
Instead of
t-shirt
my
before you had the
girlfriend.
wife.
That's right.
Yeah. So it relates directly to your 97-Up
Yes.
car. Yeah. And you told me the precise number, 4,000 some of those cars?
4,703.
And how many are in the registry? Do they have records on almost all of them?
It's been a long time since I looked.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know how many are still left.
Yeah.
But it was probably a neighborhood of half last time I looked.
Yeah. Good. So thank you again, Shawn.
Dave.
Here we are with the Collector Car Stories podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week. Thanks again, Shawn.
My pleasure.